and it's going to be really interesting. So, Natalka, дуже дякую, що ти згодилася. I know it's been a lot of scheduling back and forth, and I think on a hot summer evening, people are sitting in front of I'm imagining people are sitting in their air conditioning, cool, watching, learning, and we'll tell them all about you in a second. We're going to have about an hour of presentation, and then we're going to allow for some questions. I will moderate the questions in terms of they might be repetitive, or there might be, stuff that Natalka isn't able to answer. So if you have a question, there at the bottom of your screen, there's a button with a question mark on it called Q&A. So you can write in your question at any time. You could write it in now, you could write it in an hour, and then we'll be able to see what people have asked. If there's a lot of questions, we won't get to all of them, but we'll get to as many as we can. And I just wanted to, again, on behalf of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, welcome Natalka, thank everybody who's expressed interest in this webinar and supported us. This is part of our National Impact Campaign, which is talking about the advocacy work the community does, the impact the community makes in Canada, particularly at the national level. I think you're going to see through Natalka's presentation the statistics and the background that drives all of this. There is an interactive portion that we're going to attempt to do, and we're going to ask you to, okay, there we go. Attendees can chat in the chat. Thank you. Good feedback already. Attendees can submit questions, and there you go. We have the chat is open, and the chat we're going to use when Natalka gets to some slides where she's going to ask you to guess some statistics. So if you're near a computer, you can write in, and we'll see how that works with 150 people on the line. Okay, so again, my name's Ihor. We have Yana Necheporuk on the line as well, and I'm going to introduce Natalka Patsiurko. So Natalka Patsiurko is a sociologist born in Ukraine, educated in Ukraine, the Czech Republic, and Canada. She's received her doctoral degree at McGill University, where she researched labor migration from Ukraine to Southern Europe in the early 2000s. Natalka grew up in Ukraine and graduated from Lviv Ivan Franko University, and Ukraine has always been at the center of her research. For example, in her postdoctoral research, Natalka examined changes in civil society, ethnic diversity, national and minority identities, and senses of citizenship in Eastern European countries, including Ukraine, and in context of the EU expansion. Her publications are on these and other issues. Natalka was the first Petro Yatsik postdoctoral scholar of Ukraine at the University of Toronto in 2008, and for more than 15 years she taught sociology and classes on Ukraine and the EU in Canada at the University of Toronto, McGill, and Concordia University in Montreal. And McGill is in Montreal also. Also in Scotland at the University of Aberdeen, and in Ukraine at the Kyiv School of Economics. Since 2017, she has worked as an analyst at Statistics Canada, where she works on the issues of ethnic diversity and immigration to Canada. Her formative years were shaped by the fall of the Soviet Union, where as a student, she witnessed the growth of the national movement in Western Ukraine and the rise of an independent Ukraine in 1991. It's through the lens of these experiences that she sees the first and second Ukrainian Maidans and the start of the Russo-Ukrainian War in 2014 as historical events that have touched her life. For all of these years, Natalka has considered it her life's mission to tell people from all over the world about Ukraine and its people. And the country where she's been doing this for the longest time so far is Canada. So we are extremely pleased and privileged to have Dr. Natalka Patsiurko give her presentation tonight. Natalka, if you can share your slides, we will hand the microphone over to you virtually. And again, welcome to everybody who joined. And you can certainly keep an eye on the chat for Natalka's interactive portion. So Natalka, if you can share your screen, we'll be ready to go.
Yeah, I'm just working on this. Okay, share. Let me see. You see the screen? Can you see the screen?
We do. Okay, so
Yes,
I'm going to mute myself,
excellent.
and Natalka, I'll be on mute until we get to your interactive portion. So proszę, дуже дякую.
Yeah, thank you so much, Igor. Thank you, Igor, and the UCC for inviting me to give you this presentation. I'm very honored to be speaking in front of you today. I'm sorry I have to wear headphones because we had technical issues. but I hope that nonetheless you will learn something from this presentation. So before I start, I would like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you today from the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. And as an immigrant, I'm very privileged to be able to live and work on their land. So what I'm going to speak to you today about is about Ukrainians in Canada, their people, culture, and society. And this is the presentation that I compiled from the public access data from Statistics Canada, where I now work. And I'm going to present to you all my interpretation here and all my arguments as an independent researcher. If you are interested to have any information from the slides, unfortunately, I cannot share the slides, but after I finish my talk, you will see my email on the screen, and you can always email me if you're interested in any portion of the data, and I will direct you where you can find it. Okay, thank you very much. So let's start. Okay, so what I'm gonna cover in the presentation today is several things. So I would like to speak to you about the evolution of the Ukrainian population in Canada and how the ethnic groups are measured in the Canadian census. Also, I want to say I want to talk about the ways in which people of Ukrainian origins think of themselves, geographic distribution of Ukrainian Canadians and their places of birth, demographic characteristics of Ukrainian origin populations, such as gender, age, and generation status, immigrant status, and the periods of Ukrainian immigration to Canada, as well as mother tongue, linguistic diversity, religious affiliation of people of Ukrainian origin in Canada. And I will finish it off with a look at education, income, and poverty rates of persons with Ukrainian origins in Canada. So let's start. You probably heard a lot that Ukrainian Canadians are the largest diaspora of Ukrainian population in the world, in the Western Hemisphere. And we have various ways to kind of measure how many Ukrainians are in Canada. And the one that we're using quite a bit are those numbers that are compiled by Statistics Canada. Which they get from the census of the population. So the latest census of the population was quite a while ago, back in 2021. So next year we will have a next census, we'll have fresh data. But in the meantime, we have several estimations of how large Ukrainian population is in Canada. On the screen now, you see the graph that was compiled for the Wikipedia article on Ukrainian Canadians, and it comes from Statistics Canada, and it shows you how from 1900s up until the present time, the Ukrainian population has grew in Canada, right? And you see in the latest period, it declined a little bit. So what is this population that we're talking about? What are the people that Statistics Canada is talking about here? We can say that these are Ukrainian populations or ethnic Ukrainians, right? And for that, we could dig the latest numbers, and we will see that according to Statistics Canada, Ukrainians were the 10th largest ethnic group in Canada in 2021. So as you see, Ukrainians are here in this little dot, whereas the groups that were coming that are larger than it, of course, larger than Ukrainian group is the group of people who identify themselves as Canadian, as English, Irish, Scottish, French, and then there is a couple of other ethnic identifications. So I have a question to you. I have mute or I have hidden rather a few of the boxes here. You see of people whose ethnic groups in Canada are more diverse than the Ukrainian one. I would like you to guess some of them. As a guess, so I've hidden four groups here. As a guess, I can tell you that two of these groups are European origins populations, and two groups are ethnic origin population from the rest of the world. So can you please write in the chat to tell me what your suggestions are for these four groups? So
Okay, I'll read the Natalka. I'll read
yeah.
out the guesses. I have somebody has typed
Yeah.
German. We
Yeah.
have lots of guesses coming in here. German is Italy, Greece, Israel, Italian, India, China. Lots of people repeating.
Okay. So for the European one, somebody correctly guessed German and Italian, right? For the Asian one, can you repeat what we
There
heard?
was India, China.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm just
Chinese and Indian. Bingo.
Japan,
Okay. So
Filipino.
you're doing well. You're doing well. Thank you for guessing it. So there you see that Ukrainians are considered the 10th largest ethnic group in Canada, according to the 2021 census. But here, we would like to touch a little bit, how is ethnic identity measured in the Canadian census? What do we mean when we ask people, how do we ask people about whether they are Ukrainian or not? Well, this information is collected through the question of ethnic and cultural origin in the census of the population, and it comes in the log form. I don't know if any of you have ever completed Canadian census log form, but it's a form that has many questions, and one of the questions is an identity question that refers to people's perception of themselves in ethnic and cultural terms. So that question asks people about if they can mention the ethnic or cultural origins of their ancestors, and specifically tells people that it's a question about people's ancestral roots, and they should not be confused with citizenship, nationality, language, or place of birth. And of course, this question, people answer by themselves. This is their choice. They can write in or choose an ethnic origin. So this question really reflects respondents' own perception of their background. So the question is asked in a form where you can either choose from the list of ethnic origins, or you can specify and write in as many ethnic origins as you want, right? And so people can give one or multiple responses, and up to 6 reported origins are retained for each person, right? So people, the statistic that you report is giving you the single and multiple origins that are reported. Cultural origins are published if they are mentioned by at least 500 respondents or more. So in 2021 census, we had over 100 specific ethnic or cultural origins that were reported for the total population of Canada, and Ukrainian origins was one of those 500 possible ethnic origins, right? So let's look a little bit deeper at what people report, right? So the Canadian population in 2021 mentioned in just that the people reported ethnic and cultural origin as a Ukrainian in 2021, 22% reported that this ethnic origin as the only ethnic or cultural origin. Right? So 22 of all people who reported Ukrainian ethnic origins reported it as the only one. They didn't leave any other responses in that question. Right? The remaining three quarters, or 78%, reported Ukrainian identity together with other ethnic or cultural origin. Right? So in the total Canadian population, almost 2/3 of people, or 64%, reported single ethnic or cultural origin, while over 36 reported several. So as you see, the single origin was reported in the Canadian population by 64%, by 2/3, whereas in Ukrainian case, it's only 1/5, so 22%, who only gave the Ukrainian origin, right? What, in your opinion, what does this difference tells us about the people of Ukrainian origins in Canada? Why are these people only given Ukrainian cultural origin in 22% of their answers, and not in more, not in 60 or 50%? Why do you think so? Could you
You write into the chat. Anybody wants to guess into the chat? Okay, we have all sorts of answers coming in. People strongly identify with culture, or they are newcomers, or they are more strongly homogenous as a group. Recent immigrants. A bunch of different answers coming in.
Yeah. But why do we see a lower percentage of people with Ukrainian origin, given this origin as the only one, right? Well, we can think of multiple different reasons. We can say, for example, that Ukrainians are well rooted in the Canadian society, right? So that's why so many people give Ukrainian origins as a bunch of other ethnic origins with which they identify. We can also say that Canada is a multicultural society where a person could have many origins, right? So people mention Ukrainian origins among other ethnic origins that they might have. Or we can say the identity of people is multi-layered. So people may choose as many ways to describe themselves, and therefore they don't only speak about their only one Ukrainian ethnic origin, such as Ukrainian, but about others, right? Well, if you look by the geography of this question, we find that Quebec leads the provinces reporting Ukrainian ethnico-cultural origins as the only origins in Canada. So if you look at people in Quebec who report Ukrainian origins, we see that 29%, or almost 1/3 of them, mention Ukrainian ethnic origins as the only cultural origins that they have. Whereas in other provinces, the single responses are much less frequent, as you see. Well, I don't know why this is the case. I would invite your guests in the discussion that we have after the talk. But the only reason that I could think of is that Quebec, considering itself a separate nation, probably incites people to think of themselves more in ethnic terms, right? So people are more likely to, their culture or their ethnic origin to describing themselves when they are talking to the people in Quebec. One of the other ways people of with Ukrainian ethnic cultural origins to think of themselves? Well, one way is the indigenous identity, right? And Census has also other identity questions where indigenous identity or racialized populations are two other description that we gather of people, right? So in 2021, about 5% or nearly 60%, 67 persons of all the Ukrainian and cultural origins in Canada also reported indigenous origins, right? On this chart, you see that the largest proportion of people who reported indigenous origins in conjunction with Ukrainian ethnic identity were among the people who also identified as Métis, and a little bit less for people who identified as First Nations, right? And then the smaller numbers belong to Inuk identity and multiple indigenous responses. So that people with Ukrainian or ethnic-cultural origin think of themselves are racialized, could be considered in conjunction with racialized populations. So racialized populations in Statistic Canada are looking at the concept of visible minority. So they are people
Your sound disappeared.
We've just lost Natalka, your sound. Just one sec. Yana, can we get her back?
No, I think it's the earphones. Yeah, those are the earphones. Natalka, would you please try to disconnect them and just go through the phone? No, we can't. Natalka, try to disconnect them from your phone, the headphones. They're still connected. No.
Okay, well, apologies to everybody. We're going to, I think, take a technical break. It's very interesting content, as you see, but we're just having a technical issue with Natalka's audio. So we appreciate everybody's patience. We're just going to give it one more try, and if not, we will reschedule. But I think you've already seen the kind of important information that Natalka has to present. We're just going to try one more time to get her on the line. And I would say, since I'm filling time before we get her on the line here.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
Natalka back.
We have Natalka back. Okay, I was going to just say you can come to the Triennial Congress of Ukrainian Canadians and we'll have these kinds of discussions. But Natalka, go ahead.
Yes, I'm terribly sorry about this. Hopefully it won't repeat. So I was telling you that that people with Ukrainian origins can also identify with racialized populations, such as South Asian, Chinese, Black, Filipino, Arab, Latin American, Latin American, Southern East Asian, West Asian, Korean, or Japanese, right? And on this slide, you can see the largest racialized population that people with Ukrainian ethnico-cultural origins could also identify with. As you see, the largest one is also people who identify as Black. And here, I've again hidden a couple of other options for you. If you can guess, what do you think are these three larger other groups that people identify with among the racialized population? Could you type your answers in the chat, please?
Okay, so anybody who wants to put them in the chat, I'll read them out. We have Chinese, Arab. I'm just reading the guesses here.
Yeah.
Latino, Indigenous.
Wait. Chinese, somebody was right.
Okay.
South Asian, as in Indian, and Filipino, imagine, okay? So then people who are also identify as Japanese are there, as you see. There are about 2,000 people, yes? People who also identify with multiple visible minorities, people who identify with South Asians and others, right? And Latin Americans are at the very bottom, but there are a few hundred people who think of themselves as Ukrainian and Latin American. Altogether, about 2% of all people reporting Ukrainian ethnic and cultural origins also report racialized origin. Among other ethnico-cultural origins that people with Ukrainian identity mention, English, right? In about 200,000 cases, German, Polish, Scottish, Irish, French, and then a couple of other European origins, right? So the other cultural origins with more than 10,000 mentions are also the people who think of themselves as Austrian, Hungarian, Romanian, Jewish, First Nation, Icelandic, or French, Canadian, Danish, and American. So this gives you the whole idea of the multiplicity of ways in which people who consider themselves having ethnic Ukrainian origins in Canada, how they also think of themselves in other terms. Now, in terms of the place of residence of Ukrainian populations, Alberta and Ontario remain the two largest provinces of residence for people of Ukrainian origins. So on this graph, you see that about over 300,000 people of people with Ukrainian origins live in Alberta, and slightly in a similar number to that live in Ontario. Then in this small numbers of people who identify as Ukrainian live in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Yukon, and so on. What are these four provinces here that I've omitted, do you think, where the other four largest groups of people who identify, who have Ukrainian ethnic origins live? Can you guess? It's not something that comes intuitively. It's not something that you would normally think would apply to the Ukrainian population. But what would you guess?
So we have people guessing Quebec, Manitoba, BC, Yukon.
Well, yeah, you see, Yukon is here. You see, so it's already on this map, right? Yeah, Quebec, we said, but the next province actually is the next largest, is not what we normally would associate. It's not a prairie province that we would normally think that people with Ukrainian origins live. It's British Columbia, right? But then we have Manitoba, then we have Saskatchewan, and then we have Quebec, right? So the four largest groups of people who identify as Ukrainian in Canada live in Alberta, Ontario, BC, and Manitoba, and also in Saskatchewan. And then in Quebec, it's actually a much smaller number. Now, we can also have a look on this in the map that somebody else compiled for us on Wikipedia. Thanks for Tayan Cherepunchak, who created this map for us. And here the map shows you in the darker red color or darker beet color about the proportions of Ukrainians living in Canada among the total population of that region, right? So we will see a little bit here in Ontario, then here it's what is this here? It's Manitoba, right? The prairie provinces, right? Here we also have a little bit of Ukrainian population concentrated, right? And the other lighter colors are in BC and on in the north here, right? But largely, as we see in the prairie provinces, this is where Ukrainians make up the largest percentage of the total population in those areas, right? Now let's see about the places of birth of the people with Ukrainian origins, right? Most people reporting Ukrainian ethnic and cultural origins, on 91% were born in Canada. And 9% of them were born outside Canada. And of these people, of those who were born outside Canada, 5.3% of the 9 were born in Ukraine, so the largest majority of them. And 3.7% were born elsewhere in the world, right? So on this map, you see the places of birth for people of Ukrainian origins, for those who were born outside Canada, right? So among them, so this is, we're talking still about the 9%, right? Only the largest majority comes from Ukraine. Then you can see this wedge over here is other European, Eastern European countries, right? Then we have people coming from Europe, so nearly 27% of people with Ukrainian origins who were born outside Canada come from the other parts of Europe, right? In Asia, they mainly come from Kazakhstan and Israel. And in Western Europe, they mostly report Germany and France. And in North America, which is here, the yellow little wedge, it's mostly, we are talking about the, of course, the US. Now, we also find that 91% of people with Ukrainian origins were born in Canada. So third or more generation is the largest among the Ukrainian origin population, right? So we consider the generation as this, as such. The first generation are people who are born in other places, and for the most part, these are people who are immigrants, and they have arrived to live in Canada. The second generation are people where at least one parent of whom were born outside Canada, but the respondents themselves were born in Canada. So we have 15% of people like this that belong to the second generation about the Ukrainian origin population. And the largest percentage of people who declare Ukrainian ethnic origins, or 76, or 3/4 of the Ukrainian origin population, they belong to the third generation or more. That means that these people, as well as their parents, were born in Canada, right? So you see that this group is the largest, and that means that Ukrainian population is very much rooted in the Canadian society. Here, I want to give you some idea about the gender proportions among the Ukrainian origin population. So the gender balance is slightly tipped in favor of women in Ukrainian origin population, and it's similar to the total population. So here I chose a couple of groups that are similar to Ukrainian, such as Polish and Italian, right? And if you look at this graph, you will see that 51% of respondents among the people with Ukrainian ethnic origins were women, right? While in the Polish case, it was slightly higher proportion, but in Italian case, it was a slightly lower proportion of women. So basically, people with Ukrainian ethnic origins have a slightly more women in that population than men, right? What we can see further, if we break it down by generation, we see that among people of the first generation, there is a higher proportion of women in the Ukrainian origin population compared to the total population, right? So in the first generation, we have 51% in the, or 52% in the total population, whereas 54% of women in the Ukrainian population, right? So a proportion of women is notably high in this first generation, right? As we go down, the proportion of women decreases in each generation, but it's still higher than the proportion of women in the respective group of the total population, right? Since the first generation is mostly immigrant, we can say that women outnumber men the most among the immigrants or the new arrivals to Canada, right? Age distribution is also similar for the people of Ukrainian origins to the age distribution of the total Canadian population. So here in this graph, you see that the orange bar is the total Canadian population, and the blue bars are the Ukrainian origin population. So you see that Ukrainian origin population is slightly younger, right, in the younger age groups. In between 25 and 54, it's slightly lower than the total Canadian population. And then it has proportionally a bit lower proportion of people in the age 55 and over, right? So the Ukrainian origin population is a little bit younger than the total Canadian population. One interesting group that caught my attention here, the people over 85 years of age and more, right? And in the group of Ukrainian origin population, we have almost 7% of these people of 85 years and older, and only almost 2% of such people in the total population of Canada. So we have more older people. So I suspect that these are our Babusa and our Debussy going strong compared to the total Canadian population. Together, children and youth make nearly 32%, so 1/3 of the population with Ukrainian ethnic and cultural origins. And adults of working age make 53%, so they're the largest groups, right? And the median age of people with Ukrainian origins is 38 years, and of the total population is 41 years. So as I told you, Ukrainian origin population is a little bit younger than the rest of the population, right? So 63% of the oldest group here are women in Ukrainian origin population, whereas 59% women in the total population. So it's more about our babcias than about our DVC. The share of children in use is the highest in the third generation of people with Ukrainian ethnic origin, right? So if you look at the third generation or more, the children in use are making up 35%, so a third of the population in the third generation or more, right? Whereas the seniors over here are the largest group, almost 1/3 of the second generation. Whereas if you look at the newcomers, most people here are, of course, in what we call working age, right? So people who participate in the labor market. So over half of people in the first generation are people between the ages of 25 and 54 years. Ukrainian origin population is more rooted in Canada than some other ethnic populations, and proportion of immigrants is nearly 3 times lower than in the total population. So if you look by the proportion of immigrants, we see that in Canada, the immigrants in the Ukrainian origin population are 7.8% of the total of this population, right? Whereas 92%, as we already said, are non-immigrants, so they are Canadian citizens by birth, right? And this proportion of immigrants among the Ukrainian origin population is much lower than in the other groups, such as people of Polish origins or people of Italian origin, or the total population. In fact, the immigrants among the Ukrainian origin populations are 3 times lower than in the total population, right? Now let's speak a little bit about the 5 ways of Ukrainian immigration to Canada. So now I would like to make this historical bridge between this census data from 2021 to the historical base of Ukrainian immigration to Canada. Historically, we can speak about 5 ways of Ukrainian immigration to Canada. The first wave was in between 1891 and 1920s. And there we speak about first settlers, farmers in the prairie provinces that were later interned as the representatives of the enemy population in Canada. And researchers put the estimates on that at about 170,000 people. In the second wave, we have people who immigrated to Canada between the First and Second World War. And these were workers in the growing industrial centers of Southern Ontario and Quebec. And the estimate of this population is about 70,000 people. The third way is people who immigrated between 1945, so after the Second World War, and up to 1990. So these are post-war settlers, Ukrainian displaced person that came to Canada after the end of the Second World War, and political refugees who came in 70s and 80s. And these people mostly settled in large urban centers such as Toronto and Montreal. The fourth wave that we speak about now is the people who arrived to Canada after Ukrainian independence. So this was the stream of immigrants and refugees that were driven by economic crisis experienced by the independent Ukraine, following the fall of the Soviet Union, right? And now, unfortunately, we can speak of this fifth wave of the Ukrainian immigration to Canada, starting in 2022 with the unprovoked aggression and war started by Russia in Ukraine. So we have these 5 waves of different immigration groups from Ukraine to Canada. Now, how these groups are reflected in the census, specifically in the most recent census? Well, let's look at the first two waves. If you look there, these are people whom we probably would not have reflected in the census because they are no longer with us, right? Maybe we have a small number of people who were born or who came to Canada between 1921 and 44, but this would be very old people, right? So they would not be pretty much reflected in the census. In the third wave and the fourth wave, right? The third wave and the fourth wave, we would have them in this in the census, whereas the wave 5 that is starting in 2022 with the war of an attack of Russia, we will still not have them reflected in the census because the census was taken in 2021. So it's only the next census in next year that will register all the Ukrainian immigrants who seeking refuge from the war in Canada, right? So this is the group that we are looking to see how large it will be. Right. So in 2021, if we look by the period of arrival of the immigrants in the, we can see that most immigrants that we have, 8 in 10, they came in the last 20 years since the Ukrainian independence. Right. So these are the about 80,000. 80,000 people of total immigrants with Ukrainian origins. Less than 1 in 5 immigrants with Ukrainian origins came to Canada before 91, so this small bar here, and the total number of immigrants with Ukrainian origins was 98,000 people. So this bar here is what we identify with the third wave. And these 3 bars here are the people who arrived after the Ukrainian independence, right? So this is the fourth wave. So these are the people whom we have reflected in the latest census. And as I said again, the total number of these people is about 100,000 persons. Right now, let's try to make the projections. What will happen to the Ukrainian immigrant population in the next census? So, what will happen? How large this fifth wave will be? What I'm estimating here, these are my own estimation. I think we are looking at about 150,000 people who might be reflected in the next Canadian census as immigrants from Ukraine, right? Because from the latest figures, I believe we have about 200,000 people who came to Canada after the war, the big war started, right? And some of them are going to leave, right? So I'm thinking about 150,000 might remain in the next couple of years, right? So how does this wave compare to the previous waves, right? Of immigrants from Ukraine to Canada? As we see, it's going to be much larger, right? And if projections are accurate, the number of immigrants in the fifth wave can be 1.5 times higher than in the wave 3 and 4, right? So it could be twice or 1.5 times higher than the previous immigrants. right? Now I would like to spend a few minutes telling you about the knowledge of Ukrainian language and the language practices of people who consider themselves of Ukrainian origins or Canadians overall. So as the first point, I want to mention that over 131,000 Canadians declared knowledge of Ukrainian language in 2021, right? And if we look by generation, we see that most of these people who declared knowledge of Ukrainian language were of the first generation, so they are newcomers, right? But there's also a substantial group in the second generation, about over 1/4 of the second generation among the people who declare Ukrainian language knowledge are of the second generation. And there's a small third group of 15.6% who belong to the third generation, right? Over half of people declaring knowledge of Ukrainian language belong to the first generation. And we saw earlier that about 113,000 people who declared Ukrainian ethnic origins were also of the first generation. So from which we can make a conclusion that even if all people in the first generation who declared knowledge of Ukrainian language also declared Ukrainian origins, it means that only 2/3 or 65% of people of the first generation who declare Ukrainian origins have knowledge of Ukrainians, right? It might sound that across generation, we have a much smaller number of people who declare knowledge of Ukrainian language, and that this 15% in the third generation who say they know Ukrainian is a pretty small number. But let's look at it as perspective, right? So if you look at the other ethnic groups in Canadian society, we see that among the speakers of Ukrainian language, 16% of people were in the third generation, but it turns out that it's one of the few ethnic groups where the proportion of people in the third generation speaking Ukrainian is so high. Namely, it's Ukrainian, German. You see, Germans have 17% of people in the third generation speaking German, and I guess Hebrew, right? Where we have 13. There is also Spanish, right? So we are not that low on the proportion of Ukrainian speakers in the third generation. So here we could probably say that our Ukrainian diaspora took a great care in preserving Ukrainian language in Canada and making sure that it passes through the generation. Also, over half of people who declare Ukrainian as their mother tongue, so a language that they first learned in childhood and still understand, over half of them were born in Canada, okay? Over half of them were born in Canada, right? So they are of the third or second generation, right? So these people are declaring Ukrainian as the language that they first learned as children, right? So, and 48% of people in the first generation say that Ukrainian is their mother tongue, right? So the proportion of people declaring Ukrainian as their mother tongue decreases with the progression of the generations, as we see. But still, the fact that a majority of people declaring Ukrainian as their mother tongue who are born in Canada shows to us again that Ukrainians born in Canada care to preserve their language as a sign of cultural heritage and national identity. What about the linguistic diversity of the Ukrainian population, origin population? Well, we see some interesting finding there too. If you look at the Ukrainian origin population in Canada as a whole, we find that only 14% of people with Ukrainian origins declare language other than English as their mother tongue. So 86% of them consider English as their mother tongue. So again, these are people that are reporting Ukrainian origins and other origins, and who consider themselves somehow associated with Ukraine, right? Among the languages other than English that are reported as mother tongue, we know that over the bigger part of those people, report non-official and non-indigenous language, almost 79% of them, so over 3/4. We don't know what this language is, but this is probably Ukrainian, right? And then the other people, the other groups of people declare English and non-official language or French, right? As the other two most frequent mother tongue languages, right? If you look at languages spoken at home, right? 93,000 people, 7.4% of people who declare Ukrainian cultural origins speak languages other than English most often at home, right? And among the persons who speak languages other than English most often at home, 2/3 speak in non-official languages, or that's probably Ukrainian. English and non-official language of French are the other two groups of languages that are most spoken at home by the people with Ukrainian origins. Finally, or almost finally, a few words about the religious affiliation. If you look at the religious affiliation, we find that nearly 45% of the Ukrainian origin populations were non-religious, and more than half, 55%, declared some religion as their religious affiliation. And over 96%, so only 4%, declared non-Christian religions as their religious affiliation. So most people with Ukrainian origin, not surprisingly, are associated with Christian religions. The highest group that is reflected in the census is people who are identified as a Ukrainian Catholic, right? And other groups, the other larger groups are the other denomination of Christians, Christian Orthodox, or Christians overall. So we see here that because there was no option of the Ukrainian Orthodox, I guess people probably gave their responses between Christians in general, or they said other denominations, right? What we also find is that population with Ukrainian ethnic origins are less religious than the total Canadian population. So 55% of them declare a religion, whereas 65% of the total Canadian population does. It's a little bit surprising for me, but I'm thinking that if you look at people who only declare Ukrainian origins among all of these populations, then we will have people actually being more religious or at the par with the Canadian population. People of Ukrainian origins also have higher level of education. So we see here that people of Ukrainian origins that are blue bars, we are more likely to have bachelor's degree or higher, right? And be less represented in no certificate, diploma, or degree group. So overall, they have a higher level of education than the total education. And if you look at the income, the blue line here is people of Ukrainian origins. And if you see that line, we see that these people of Ukrainian origins, they are more represented in the higher income categories, right? So if you look at the average after tax income in 2020, for the people of Ukrainian origins, it was almost $60,000, whereas for total population, it was only $45,000. So Ukrainian population had higher average after tax income, right? And a higher median after tax income. Now, also, Ukrainian population tended out to be less in poverty. And here, for the poverty, we have two basic measures. First, we look at people are considered poor because they can't afford the basic qualities and quantities of food, clothing, and shelter, right? And by this measure, 6.7% of people with Ukrainian origins are considered poor, whereas 8.1% in total population are poor. So Ukrainians are less poor. And they're also less poor by the low income measure, right? Where there is a threshold that is established as a low income measure based on the after-tax income of private household. And on this measure, Ukrainians are also showing smaller poverty rates. If you look here, it's 8.7% as compared to 11% for the total population, right? So I'm driving here to the conclusion, and sorry if I was speaking for too long, but what I was trying to do in this presentation is to show you that people of Ukrainian origin are a well-established and integrated population in Canada, being in the country for generations and contributing to diversity and prosperity of society. As this review demonstrates, the diversity of ways in which the population that thinks of themselves as Ukrainian origin identifies itself in ethnic, linguistic, and religious terms, and shows the big impact the Ukrainian immigrants have on the mosaic on the present day of Canada. We also learned that people with exclusively Ukrainian ethnic and cultural origin make up about 1/5 of this diverse, larger population of people with Ukrainian origins. And of course, we can do further analysis to show the diversity of outcomes of this population, most importantly, across generation and in terms of single and multiple ethnic and cultural origins. So we would enhance our analysis if you look more at the separately the groups of people who only think themselves as Ukrainian, or people who think of themselves as Ukrainian and somebody else. And on this note, I thank you very much for listening to my presentation, and I invite questions and comments that you might have.
Дуже дякую, Наталю. I think everybody has greatly enjoyed your presentation. Our apologies for the sound, but we'll get you on again for everybody who wasn't able to connect tonight. So, Natalia, there's a couple of questions in the Q&A.
Yes.
We'll stick. There's 4 questions, so we'll go to those. So the first question is, what year, when did the census start offering Ukrainian as an option to identify on the survey?
Very interesting. So from my exploration, okay, this has been going on since at least 1940s, if not earlier, okay? And I came through a very interesting note in Statistics Canada archives, which were speaking about the need to differentiate Ukrainians. I believe this note was from 1940s, okay? And it said that there are populations that we should not record their ethnic affiliation based on the countries from which they arrived to us. But we have to record their ethnic affiliation based on the language that they speak, right? So, and they gave an example of Ukrainians. In that time, Ukrainians were coming either from the Austro-Hungarian Empire or from Russia. But they were counted in Canadian census as Ukrainians. So somebody was very smart there back then in the Canadian census team to make this distinction, right, and to emphasize the role of languages in determining ethnic identity, right? And Ukrainian ethnic origins since then were recorded on the regular basis, and now they are, as I mentioned, more than 500 ethnico-cultural origins that we report in Canada each census.
Okay, Дякую. Now, easy question for you, I'm sure. What does N.O.S mean? There was a couple of places in the survey where it said NOS. What does that mean?
And not otherwise specified, right? So, for example, but sometimes people mention their religion as Christians, right? And it says Christian NOS. That means that they said only that they were Christians, but they didn't specify any further what the denomination of Christianity they were affiliated with.
Okay. We're going to keep going. A couple more questions here for Natalka. The question is, are there statistics available on the QIT visa holders, and how many of the 300,000 are still in Canada? And I would say, based on the work UCC has done, we don't know that yet, but go ahead.
Yeah, this statistic is available.
Oh, okay.
It's mainly held by the IRCC, right? And we are only now starting to get some data from IRCC where we can spot those immigrants who came to Canada after 2022. So I am going to have a small project there looking at what were the numbers of these people. And if I have an opportunity, if my management allows me, I'm going to investigate that and publish a short piece. But that will be coming up more after December, because in December, we will get the fuller data in StatsCan in terms of the immigrants who arrived 2022 and after, and how they are integrated into the labor market, right? Okay. So we can have the information on what country these immigrants arrived from. So I will be looking at Ukrainians and whether they have a job in the next 2 years in Canada, right? Okay. Now, I will be curious myself to see how many people like that show up, right? Because you need to be filing taxes in Canada to be reflected in the employment statistic, right? So from this data, we might only gather what is the size of the Ukrainian population who arrived after 2022, right? And where they live. If these people were also working, we will also have an idea about how they did in Canadian labor market. Okay. So I will keep you posted if I'm able to do this research and if the data, if the numbers are sufficient, which I think they will be, but I'm looking for a more fuller data on that regard, because I want to know whether people found their jobs and what are their incomes, right? Okay. Because that would be very interesting.
Okay, there's like two questions that are very similar. So a couple of people have asked, how are Ruthenians or Rusene how were they considered as in the data in terms of Ukrainian and other ethnic origins?
I think that Rusene are probably put as a separate category, but I'm not sure, right? But so I think that the census specifically asked for Ukrainian, but I will have to check if Rusene or Ukrainians were there. In fact, I must have a list about of this ethnic or cultural origin. So let me just check, and we can have a look right away whether these people were. Oh, there you go. Ethnic, right? Okay, that's not this one. Just give me a second. But I should have the list of cultural origins. Oh, example of ethnic and cultural origins. So we will know right away. Thanks to the internet. So let's look for Rusene or Ruthenians if they are there, right? So you see, it's an alphabetical order.
We don't see your screen, Natalia. We just see your presentation slides.
Okay. You see my okay. So I'm looking here, and let me just check for you. So Ruthenians. Just a second. Romanians, Ruthenian. Yes, there is such a category, right? But the story that I gave you today pertains to people who identify themselves as Ukrainian. So to see how many Ruthenians are declaring themselves in Canadian census, we would have to look at this census data specifically,
Okay.
right, for that group.
Great. And Natalia, we can, I don't know if you want to share your email address or not, but we've recorded tonight's presentation. We will send it around to everybody who's registered. So
Yeah.
we can share that with people. I'll do one more question that was here, which was looking at the 2026 census. What is your analysis or your thoughts on what that will look like and what that might show us?
So as I said already, I'm estimating that about 150,000 of new Ukrainian immigrants will show up in that census. All right, but my guess is as good as yours, and I'm trying here to share with you my my email.
We'll share that as a follow-up, but
yeah, but you have my email over here.
yeah, there we go.
So please feel free to record it and let me know if you have any questions, right? I'm very curious, as much as you are, to see how many Ukrainians, because again, participation in the census is a legal obligation of all Canadians, but new immigrants might not always be aware that they must participate or have the connection, So we will have a few people missing in the crowd there. But I think we will see, if my estimations are correct, that we will see the number of Ukrainian immigrants in Canada to double as a result of the group that arrived after the beginning of Big War.
Yeah. Natalia, I'm going to just say one last question from me for everybody. If people want to learn more about the census, I mean, and dive into some of these numbers, what should they do? Where should they go? Where can people find general information about the census?
That's very easy. You have the big website of Statistics Canada. So if you just Google Statistics Canada, when you go to that page, right away, on the top of the page, you will see census results. And if you click there, you will have all the results of the census and the concept that the census uses as well. It's questions and some of the results displayed in that. Yes, thank you. Somebody just put it.
Yeah, I just posted it.
I guess it's you. Yes. Yeah. So it's easily available. It's not as easy to read and find those tables. So this is the jobs that I've done for you here. Right. So you need to know a little bit how to dig into this data, but trust me that Statistic Canada has a wealth of information on Ukrainian population and other people who live in Canada, right? Which unfortunately is not the same as for Ukrainian authorities nowadays, because as you know, the most recent census in Ukraine was done only in 2001, so 24 years ago, right? And even before the war, they were considering not putting the census back because of the expenses that it will entail. But with the war, of course, counting the population becomes even more difficult. Right, but before the war, some of those telephone estimations, they put the Ukrainian population in Ukraine at about 37 million people, right? And the estimations that I'm hearing now about the number of people who remain in Ukraine are about 25 million people. So it will be very much in the interest of the Ukrainian state and officials to kind of promote this recent bill that they proposed on multiple citizenship of Ukraine in Ukraine, because they want to make sure that even if we lose a big number of people who moved from Ukraine as a result of big war, that we establish this community of Ukrainians worldwide to see, that Ukrainian community in the world is still standing strong.
Yeah. Okay, Natalka, дуже дякую. Thanks for your amazing work, and thanks to Yana for helping with our technical fix tonight. We look forward to hearing more from you, Natalka, and about your amazing research. Дуже дякую всім, що були нині вечором. Natalka is going to have that kind of presentation, we hope, at the Triennial Congress in November and others. And we look forward to many more important discussions ahead. So, дуже дякую. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Добраніч.
Thank you, Dobranic. Bye-bye, everyone.